All right. Good night, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the Sideline Sports and Entertainment, the All Cedar. This is our first season, our first episode of our podcast. We have some very esteemed guests. They're very esteemed in my book. On our panel tonight, and we definitely have a topic, or we'll be addressing topics that will definitely get some conversations going. And tonight on my panel, we have Dr. Tracy King, Mr. Saron Cox, and also Tito Moss. So, with that being said, I'll go right ahead and let the guests, these very esteemed guests, go ahead and introduce themselves. Dr. King, since you're the lone female, again, like you said, I guess we have some gentlemen on here. We've all voted to have you or elected you to do the first introduction.
Okay, I will take that challenge. Um, I am Dr. Tracy King, clinical psychologist, trained licensed in the United States as well as the Bahamas. I have a private practice called Thriving Haven, and I've been providing mental health services for about 15 plus years in a diverse amount of settings, inpatient as well as outpatient. I am glad to be invited to have a good conversation with this group of wonderful men. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I am ready to delve into this topic with you guys.
Okay, awesome. All right, next up, I got Mr. Saron Cox.
Good evening, all, and thank you for having me. My name is Saron Cox. I'm an 18-year Ministry of Education teacher. I teach physical education, and I'm also a coach, track and field, and basketball. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, man. And lastly, but certainly not least, got Mr. Tito Moss. Go ahead, man, Tito.
Good evening, all. Tito Moss. I am a track and field coach for the past 16 years. I'm also, I have a private club, track club, for the past 3 years. Beyond that, I'm also a building contractor by profession. I'm happy to be here with this panel, and we're looking forward to a great discussion.
Okay, all right, awesome. Again, thank you everybody for taking times out of your busy schedules to even come and sit down with me and have this discussion on this podcast. Again, like I said, very much appreciated. Now just diving into our first topic of our first season. Again, it's I guess something that we in the Bahamas might not have to deal with directly, but I do see it as something that our student athletes, even some of our professional athletes, will definitely have to be dealing with, maybe outside of our borders. With that being said, tonight's topic actually has to do with transgenders and executive orders. As we all know, President Biden, President of the United States, during his inauguration, within the first few days, he signed an executive order which allowed for transgenders to compete in women's sports. And again, we want to open up the conversation, delve into it, and hopefully the conversation, just won't end or stop here, but we definitely want to get it started and, get the conversations going. And with that being said, and this is I'm going to open this up to the panel. Do you think the inclusion of transgenders in sports actually hurts or advances the equality discrepancies? And tell you what, Saran, you wanna go ahead and tackle that?
Well, for me, and on the way I see it, inclusion, I understand why inclusion, but inclusion hurts when you're talking about athletic competition, and here's why. In athletic competition, there has to be a level playing field. If there is no level playing field, there's no integrity in the competition. Anybody can sit on the sideline and can predict who's going to win, because there isn't a level playing field. If I am a man and I am let's say a shot putter, and I'm one of the best in the world, and I decide to transition to a female, what becomes of my performance once I am a female in the female divisions? I think that, even if I didn't perform as good as I did as a man, and when I say as good, I mean throwing the same distances, I'm pretty sure that as you transition, you'd already be way ahead of the competition that is the women, because your muscular skeletal structure, once you become an adult, that is set. And you have an unfair advantage over your competition. That's where I think that this policy hurts athletic competition. There is a reason that we group students according to ages as they move through primary school, through high school, and once they reach adulthood, we don't bother with ages anymore. The reason that is because as we develop, we pass different levels of strength, and so we divide the kids up into age groups so as to maintain a level playing field. I think I think inclusion, especially when you're looking at Olympic sports, and even you know, I think it's not a level playing field. That's my biggest problem with it.
Okay, all right. I'm sure, just like yourself, some other persons might be of that view. Um, Tell you what, Dr. King, I'd love to hear your point of view, especially coming from, I guess, from your profession as well.
So I'm going to be on the other side of that opinion. Working with athletes where I am and just a whole diverse set of persons, my approach is more inclusion and dealing with the issues that the person may have at the time. And when we think about what transgender means, it in essence means that this is somebody who is struggling with their sense of identity, that they were born a certain gender or biological characteristics as male or female, and mentally they're not seeing themselves as. So if a person is born biologically a male, cognitively speaking, they're seeing themselves as female. And so there's that struggle where we talk about doing the society norms of what male and female equals, such as wearing dresses if a person is having a biological female body. They don't see themselves as female, they see themselves as male. And that spurs a lot of mental health issues where there's this conflict between what society tells them that they need to be and what they see themselves as. And I've seen it on my end, the struggle. And what does that mean when we're talking about helping a child or helping an adolescent or adult come to terms with this internal struggle? And what does that mean for them in their overall life? And playing sports or being a part of a sports team is a part of their life. And so I see it on that side, and I can understand why the order was signed, in helping this individual find a sense of themselves and a sense of purpose within a society that then leads to more inclusion. But I can also see it in relation to what Coach was saying of how did that relate. But as a clinical psychologist, I'm going to say that I understand the struggle for some of these individuals and can see the need for why the executive order was made.
Great. Also, Dr. K, I appreciate you even giving us a little bit of education there, as far as I guess as far as the definition, because I think there's, even for me, sometimes I am unclear about what the proper, or I guess the definition of what a transgender is. Coach Tito, let's go ahead and have you chip in, man. Let's chime in on your thoughts on the executive order.
Okay, well, when I first found out about it, I was not at all surprised, because Dems tend to be very liberal on their approach. And when the current president was vice president, he was a part of the Obama administration, who was very liberal in their views. I think if memory serves, one of the executive orders former President Obama signed was, if you were male and you identified yourself as a female, you can use the female restroom. So again, I was not surprised with this particular executive order. From the question at hand, though, the executive order definitely helps or advances the transgender or the inclusion aspect of it. I see why, and I understand that element. I get it. However, when it comes to sports, more specifically, I think it definitely hurts. And piggybacking on what Coach Cox said earlier, there's a reason why we group, using high schoolers as an example, under 20 kids, under 17, separate and apart from the under 15, because there's the physicality difference. There's a reason why head up men and women don't compete against each other in sports, saving apart if it's a sport whereby you have a co-ed team. So I fall on the side of the argument that if, as an example, if a male decides that and recognizes himself, identifies as a female, I think it does give him a comparative advantage. And then that goes to the integrity of sports. And it also goes to something that Coach Cox also mentioned, that how do you measure against that backdrop? Because, I mean, yes, I'm sure that one can make the argument that in transferring over that male becoming a woman, he will lose some of his physicality and so forth. But there is no escaping the fact that there is already an inherent built-in advantage. So again, I think it definitely hurts sports. I have no issue from a coaching perspective of inclusion, but I don't know if the solution is allowing transgender male to compete head up with females because they identify as such to be the solution. I think it creates other problems in athletics as the example. I think the other way around, a female transferring over to a male would prove less to be an issue competing against head up against males. But of course, in the example I mentioned earlier, I think we will have some issues integrity-wise. We'll have some issues in regards to being able to separate and measure the integrity aspect, as Coach Cox mentioned earlier. So I understand, I support inclusion. However, I think this forcing transgenders into mainline athletics through the NCAA and others, I think you're opening a can of worms that I think you're creating more problems than you're actually solving, in my view.
So I guess just from all of our conversations, I think that we all are definitely saying that, hey, we don't have a problem with inclusion, but I guess just I don't know if we can say the forcing or the pushing of a particular ideology. I guess the implementation, there's something wrong, or we might have a problem with that. Now, Dr. King, again, just from a mental standpoint, what are some of the things that we need to be aware of? Again, we're just coming from the perspective that, hey, transgenders are allowed to compete in female sports. I think both Coach Tito and Saran brought up a good point now. Whereas, hey, you might have females that want to, or that actually do compete in male sports, but it's a little bit different. Or when you have a transgender wanting to compete in a female sport. So I guess my question to you would be two-sided. One, how does, I guess, an athlete deal with that who identifies with a transgender person? And then from the other side, how do athletes, female or male, deal with having or seeing a transgender compete in their sport and, I guess, not discriminate or not feel as though they're being slighted or taken advantage of?
So, I feel like this executive order and just the inclusion of transgender in relation to sports is just another step when we talk about the progression of inclusion. When we look at history, for example, we've seen persons fight for various rights, persons of color, women fighting to be in situations that they were at one point denied. And this is just another example, but in relation to transgender. And yes, every time we change, every time we evolve to be more inclusive of persons, creates a whole gamut of other things that may come after. And I hear when you talk about the differences in measures, but we have to look at how do we move forward. When females were added to male-dominated teams, that inclusion led to changes in policies, changes in measures. And so I think we have to look at it as what is transgender? To educate ourselves and understand that yes, physically there may be some advantage in certain respects, but are we looking at the individual as just someone who's an athlete, or are we looking at them as an individual, a human being that is inclusive of the physical, but also the mental capacity to engage in a team that relates to who they see themselves as? And as we move forward, when we talk about sports, is educating the teammates, educating the coaches, educating the persons that are involved in these sports, and understanding that just because outside they may look like a male or they may look like a female, mentally and cognitively they see themselves differently. And that means that if someone may be biologically male, but they see themselves as female, they're not going to feel comfortable going into a male locker. They will feel more comfortable because they identify as female. And so it requires us to have a more open understanding of the issues of transgender, the awareness, and creating policies and creating an environment where it's inclusive not only of what society says males and females are dealing with, but also what does other aspects of society is dealing with. So in my kind of point of view is, even though that this executive order happened and it's going to lead to so many other issues or a Pandora's box, is it worth making changes to address and be more inclusive? Or are we supposed to stay on a track of exclusion? Because if we had stayed on a track of exclusion throughout history, then women would not be where they are, men will not be where they are, men of color, or just a whole different kind of looking at race and culture and gender. Inclusion means respect, inclusion means rights for all. And so me being who I am, not only professionally, but also individually, I'm always a person that will look at the human rights of an individual. And so you ask me, how does this impact? I think we have to educate. We have to understand why transgender people differ. What are their unique issues, and how can we help them navigate those particular issues, and how can we make them more inclusive, is my point of view. And education, but more also comfort level, and being inclusive of the policies, whether the policies includes measurements, those type of things.
I think we've definitely reiterated that I guess that there definitely needs to be some talk, and there are going to be changes when it comes to the rules. So I just want to bring up a note here.
Sure. Can I say something before we move on?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
It's interesting that we bring up the rights of women, okay, and how we advance. Today in sports, at least we try to. I don't think we try to give women, the same amount of recognition and support as men do, right? Remember, back years ago, there was a debate over how much of college uh, running through sports could be the men's sports versus women's sports. And I think there was a legal copy in which women won their fair share of all sports revenues, even though men's sports would have brought more revenue. Okay, it is those same women whose rights we now violate by allowing somebody that is a man to now compete against those women. You see, when you're talking about testing and measurement, nobody ever said that anybody transition couldn't play a sport. If they said that, they couldn't play a sport and be compared to a woman who would have been born a woman. You see, I want to be careful. I never felt as though anybody should be excluded from sports. And oftentimes when I talk to you, we wish that more people, especially in the gaming culture, would get involved in sports. And so I will make sure that the things you kind of did this too. I will make sure parents stand inclusion and I support it, especially as a Ministry of Education teacher. Let's say inclusion. I don't want to stray off topic, but we have students who recognize it. They behave and I figure that they're wrestling with those same kinds of issues. They identify as a girl, even though they may be biologically or physically to a parents, a boy, they identify as a girl. And so I will be there. We wish that everybody would feel, we wish that everybody would be passionate about sport. But when we're talking about measuring performances, you see, yeah, we have to make a distinction, you see, because it's not an playing field. And so, like you said earlier, I understand we got to make sure that people are fair for all parties. When you come this far, and the actual revenues, how the thing is, the women's soccer team in the U.S., women's national soccer team, they are still battling to get equal compensation compared to the men. And so when we talk about inclusion for the transgender, yes, inclusion, but we got to make sure that we're not violating the rights of those who have already gotten this far. You understand that? I just wanted to say that before we move.
Yes, I agree.
Tito, you had something to say? You wanted to hop in on that?
Well, yeah, I agree with Coach Cox. I mean, I don't think our positions are too far from each other, in the sense that we are not anti-inclusion from this perspective of persons being engaged in athletics in any regard. However, let's be honest. In boxing matches, you don't have men boxing against women. We don't have in basketball men teams playing against women's teams, and I could go right along the line. In track and field, as an example, they just introduced in the last World Relays here in the Bahamas, I think about 4 years ago, the first mixed relay, which had 2 male runners and 2 female runners as a part of a 4x4. And a matter of fact, this Olympics, they're going to have the mixed 4x4 for the first time ever. So as far as inclusion, I mean, we are seeing that athletics in general are continuing to make strides of having males and females interact across genders in athletics. However, when we're talking about transgender, there's a reason why there's a paraplegic Olympics. Why? Because they have some physical limitations that would impede their performance against somebody that doesn't have that limitation. And I think the same is true for sports in general. And that is why generally we don't see men compete against women head up, and women compete against men head up. Okay. And I think that area there is the debate that will be probably raging with the transgender again, I don't think many persons have a real issue with inclusion. Well, some maybe, but from my perspective, I have no issue with inclusion. I just err on the side of Coach Cox when we say that if we're going to be inclusive, why we can't have the Olympics where there are some sports that are transgender? I have no issue with that. I mean, we have a Paralympics right now that is held weeks after the regular Olympics. So I'm all for inclusion, but I just agree that, and I feel that for integrity of athletics, that there should be a way to delineate separately transgender, male, and female. That's just my view on that particular topic before we move forward.
And well, actually, all of you kind of chimed in, which kind of takes me into a point or a post that I did want to bring up. And like I was saying, hey, this issue has been around for quite some time, and is not going to go anywhere. So yeah, here we are discussing it right now. So actually, in 2017, and this is a post that I actually grabbed off of social media. So it says that there was this gentleman, this athlete, Craig Tefler. In 2016, he ranked 200 in the men's hurdle in 216. He was ranked 390th in 2017. Okay, he changed his name to Cece. And in 2018, the said athlete won the championship, finishing first in the women's hurdle in 2019. So there we have, I guess, some of a possibility, which I guess in this case it isn't a possibility. This actually happened. So here again, this is some of the things that will happen should this executive order goes through. Gentlemen, hop in again from the I'd like to take the coaches, and Dr. King, I'd like to have you chime in on there, about just this particular post.
Yeah. Sports teaches you a lot of life lessons. This thing with the young man who goes to CC and then competed for them. I'm questioning his character. As athletes, I always try to teach physical to not only step on their own side, to step on those who are really wild to get good people. Not only that, it says something about your character, then you look to learn for yourself as a superior competition. It also says something about you when you know pretty well that you belong in the under 15 division. If you're trying to compete in the under 13 division, there is something missing when you're talking about your sportsmanship. Okay? And so, when you hear a story like that, it makes you wonder. The same guys like that all the time. It's not like they're going to. If you want to do it, go down and do it on the paper, do it. So as to make yourself better when you're facing your level of competition. And so, I understand the inclusion, but I look at a guy that transition. Really, like, one of the things in the world is really that he's doing. One, when he goes to dinner, he's celebrating, he feels that part to be celebrated. If he wants to celebrate the fact that he transitioned from now he felt he was on the inside, I understand that. And I applaud him. But if he is applauding the fact that he is one of the fastest women in the world now, I look at him like, I don't know about that. Something is wrong about that for me as a competitor. I don't know about that.
Coach Tito, any your thoughts on the post or comments?
Yes, I saw the same post online. several weeks back as well. And I felt similar sentiments as that of Coach Cox, that I'm all for someone finding their truth, but I have a real issue with the competitive aspect of it, because I think it undermines the women who've worked hard in their discipline as well, to be somewhat robbed for somebody, in my view, who has a comparative advantage. And I have no issue with him living his truth and competing in sports, but I think it should be on a level playing field. And I look at the result with somewhat, it should be an asterisk or something against the participation. Or I figure if we're going to allow, I have no issue with allowing transgenders to compete. I figure that they should compete as transgenders, head up against each other. But I think it's unfair to the women who were born women to compete against transgenders who were born males. I know it sounds repetitive, but we can't get away from the fact that that I think that they have an inherent advantage. It's not to be, keep repeating the same thing, but I just think that it comes back to that. And this poses a prime example to what me and Coach Cox was referencing from we got on the podcast. And I'm quite familiar with CC, and he hurdles, she hurdles. So I'm quite familiar with the performance you referenced.
Dr. King?
I mean, what I'm hearing is the consistent concern for the disadvantage, which I think is a very important point. In essence, when we talk about sports and athletic ability. And so I believe that with this move, there needs to be more consideration of how do you move forward with this inclusion? What does the measure look like? What are the parameters? And I think that's kind of what we're all kind of saying in different ways, is that there is the support for the inclusion of others, but recognizing with this inclusion, there's other aspects that need to be addressed, that we can't move forward with what is in place, that we need to put certain things in order so that there is a better and a more even playing field for all members in various sports.
I think we can all agree with that. And with also with that, Dr. King, I guess I'll go into my next question. Again, it's kind of like a spin-off. Yeah, we've been dealing with from the aspect of inclusion. I just want to, I guess, kind of flip the script a little bit. Suppose there's an athlete out there, a female athlete, and I guess this hits more true to home. We're here in the Bahamas, we're a very homophobic society. What happens or how does a female athlete coming from the Bahamas, not having to, I guess, deal with this issue so much, but goes off to school, participates in college sports, and runs into this person who now competes in their sport and actually, is successful. Well, I guess successful is relevant here. Again, we're already talking about questioning character, but let's say, hey, the person is successful. How does that athlete deal with it?
Again, it comes down to awareness, but also education. And I think being aware that there are some changes, moving for me, different countries, etc. There's always going to be some impact based on your environment, based on some change. And I think when we're talking about local athletes going to the United States and having to deal with this situation, it means that they need to be open to maybe seeking someone that they can get support from. in guiding them through this change or this new environment for them. Because when we move or when we are in someone else's house, then we have to basically follow their rules. And by that, we have to adjust, whatever that means, us having to just have conversations of what does this mean for me as an athlete? What do I need to do? How do I compete with persons that may be biologically male? What does this mean overall? How do we then measure for the various categories for different sports? So I think it goes beyond just the individual. It's more of a conversation at the individual level, but also at the team level, and then whatever the organization level is, of how international countries are going to participate in sports in the United States, especially when those countries have different rules. So I don't really have one answer to that. I think it's going to be more of a case by case in relation to the student, in relation to the sport itself, and what does the impact that this executive order has on that particular sport.
For the coaches, I'd like to, I guess, throw it out there to both of you. How to, again, like I said, I don't see it as any major problem that we here in the Bahamas have to deal with or are dealing with at this time. But I'm sure there may be instances where maybe you have dealt with it or seen it in the past. Or how do you plan to address it? Should that situation ever present itself?
Okay, well, I think this topic is going to be one that's going to continue to be center focus. I think inclusion will come. However, what that would look like, I am not quite sure at this point. I think the discussion is being had and will continue to be had. And I think where this will play out will depend on the discipline and which sport that we may be talking about specifically. I want to mention something that's somewhat related. And I have a daughter that's in university, and we know that earlier last year, they're having riots based on race. And my daughter is a Black woman in the United States. We in the Bahamas don't have racial issues or tensions up front to the point where it's on the streets and, they have rioting and so forth. But that was a discussion as a parent that I had to have with her, that, race relations are real. And she's on a campus with 30,000 plus kids from a diverse background. So I mentioned that to parallel the point that this issue of inclusion and transgender, I think, is not only topical, but I don't think it's going anywhere. But what that will look like, I don't know if I have the answer. But in terms of me as a coach, when presented, I mean, I treat all human beings with respect. I would obviously have to be governed with how my governing body of my sport, which is track and field, approaches it. So how we operate will be dependent on the position taken by the governing body of athletics, which is in this instance the B3As. To this point, that is not an issue that's center focus, but I can foresee in a not so distant future that issue, the importance and relevance would be more in focus.
Yeah, to your question, how I deal with it. Because people try to even live on the net, when you're talking about it, because you don't get to say how you deal with it once you use the facts. Because I work basically with school children, I really realize I don't really say that I take part in the things, and so I think you don't really encounter that before I do. You encounter something like that, and particular parents will have to help them by they feel like they get stuff. And so I don't think that I'd have to deal with it if I had to. Um, so I don't know. You know, I can't say. You know, whenever we made it for a city competition with cities in Sonoma, then we work hard. You know, we look for any other competitors about it. We may overlook it. You know, you pay attention to your nutrition. You know, and but other than that, I really don't think that's it. I don't know what to say to the young lady. The field is where she's competing against somebody that doesn't know. You know, get those up and give up. I think it's, you know, people to, but like I said, I don't think that we ever have to deal with that. At least, I shouldn't say we ever have to deal with it. No time in the near future, I think those in pro sports, Olympic sports, collegiate sports, you also have to face that.
Yeah, is just like everybody is saying, it's definitely an issue that's not going anywhere. As you can see, even from the article that I gave reference to, hey, that article dated back to 2017 or 2016. So again, it's not going to go anywhere. But I would love to thank all of you for participating in the first ever All Cedar podcast. Again, first season, first episode. Dr. Tracy King, your input, your knowledge, again, invaluable. Coach Tito Moss, Coach Saron Cox, both of you, again, much appreciated. Also giving us, I guess, an insight or from a point of view from what you guys are actually seeing out there as well, and what may be to come for the future. But again, hey, the whole idea of this conversation is to, or this topic was to, get the conversation going and hopefully come up with some solutions before we're actually kind of blindsided or before we actually run into, I guess, or face any major issues. Hey, at least prepare ourselves and have some idea of where we want to take it and propel sports. So again, thank you all of you for participating, and hey, looking forward to doing the next one. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Sideline Sports and Entertainment Bahamas, the All Cedar podcast. Yes, this is our first season, our first episode, and yeah, we're definitely diving into, I guess, it's a topic that's gonna be around for us for a while. It's been around, and yeah, like I said, we definitely just want to open up the conversation and yeah, make people aware. So on this segment, we have a very good friend of mine, and that is Mr. Audley Hanna. So Audley, hey, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Let the folks know who are listening, who you are, and what you do.
Hey, Jerome. Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure to be on here, and I've been looking forward to coming on and speaking with you on some sports for some time. So, as Jerome said, my name is Audley Hanna. I am an attorney here in the Bahamas. I do some sports law as well. When I was away in school, I got a degree in sports law. So sports and the law have always been two of my interests, and I've been able to combine them a little bit. And I'm happy to come on the show tonight and talk a bit about both of them.
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, Audrey, I will not waste any time. We're gonna get right into the topic that we chose for our season opener. As this year started, of course, the United States held their elections. President Biden was elected as president, and within the first couple of days, he signed an executive order which allows for transgenders to compete in women's sports. And again, here, this conversation or this podcast with this episode is again to open up that conversation and yeah, dive into definitely some issues or some things that even in our previous segments realize that we're going to have to deal with. So I guess the first question, and is kind of open ended, just from your opinion, does inclusion of transgenders actually hurt or advance the equality discrepancies that we're currently facing in sports right now?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer, Jerome. I don't know if we're going to be able to solve that issue anytime in the near future. I think we have a really big come to Jesus moment on this. I think equality is important.
Yeah.
We should try to make people comfortable and let people live their lives the way they want to live them within the confines of the law, of course. But there's also fair play.
Yes.
And it's a real concern as to whether or not transgender individuals competing, specifically a transgender person who was formerly a male who may now be a female, and them seeking to compete in female sports, that is really a concerning issue as to whether or not a transgender female who is formerly a male is able to compete fairly in a female sports environment. And I think until the science is clear on that, I think we should be cautious about proceeding in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you know the female South African athlete. Her name I always forget and won't be able to pronounce properly in any event. But there is a female South African athlete who has a condition where she was born with very high levels of testosterone. And when she tests for in normal testing, her testosterone levels have always been very, very high. And there was some pushback from the female athletes within the sport saying that she should not be able to compete because of her condition, which they say give her an unfair advantage as for the testosterone that she has. So imagine that issue on a bigger scale with a person who may have been born a man who is now a female competing in women's sports.
You know something, in another segment, we had the coaches on from track and field, and that was definitely an issue that came up. As a matter of fact, we gave reference to, another situation concerning a transgender male who actually competed in, let's see here. Yeah, it was actually, this dated back to 2016. So he ranked 200 in the men's hurdles in 2016, and he was ranked 390th in 2017. So he actually fell in the rankings in a year. He changed his name to Cece in 2018 and said he's a woman now. He won the championship, finishing first in the women's hurdle in 2019. So it's definitely a more extreme scenario. The lady, even the athlete that competes from South Africa, her name slips me as well. But that's a more recent issue and something that's definitely real. But actually, both of these situations are things that are happening and that we actually have to deal with as sports. One of the other points that I did want to touch on, and now that you actually brought this up, is is there a legal definition of transgender, or what is the legal definition of a transgender?
Well, I can only speak from a Bahamian perspective, and from a Bahamian perspective, there is no legal definition of transgender in the Bahamas. The Bahamas currently does not recognize transgender. I don't know if I should use the word ism. I'm not sure if that's the proper transgenderism.
Right, I get you.
For the risk of being politically incorrect, I'm going to use that for the podcast. But the Bahamas currently doesn't have any legal provision which represents any sex other than male or female. So there's no transgender in law in the context of the Bahamas.
So I guess my question after that would be, so if there was an instance of a transgender person, they would have to either present themselves from a legal standpoint, either as male or female.
Yeah, they would have to be male or female. And beyond that, they would have to, in law, they would be the sex they were at birth. So whatever the birth certificate says, sex in the Bahamas is still assigned at birth, or not assigned, but still determined by birth.
Okay. I do have another question. I guess it's kind of related to the same thing. And here again is just to get well, one of the things that we do know again with, I guess, dealing with inclusion and also discrimination is there are going to be some instances or maybe some uncomfortable conversations or situations that we're going to have that we're going to actually going to be faced with. And here again, this is just to, you know, open up those conversations and hey, give everybody a seat at the table, so you know, so we actually can get a better understanding and then hopefully move forward. So
Absolutely.
I guess my other question, and it's related, does the law actually prohibit or protect transgenders from discrimination, I guess, in sports and even on a larger scale, just in the community?
Yeah, and that's perhaps an impossible question to answer because the law is silent on the issue. So there in the Constitution, there is protections against discrimination on sex, race, creed,
Right,
religion. But sex, as defined in the Constitution, only contemplates maleness and femaleness. It doesn't contemplate any other form of human sexuality. So there's no law, there's no constitutional right, and there's no legal basis by virtue of which a person can be protected based upon them being transgender or anything other than male or female. And at the same time, there's no law which expressly enables persons to discriminate against transgender individuals. But you know, there's not. So really, I guess the simplest answer is there's nothing to expressly protect transgenders, and there's nothing to expressly injure them, save and except that there's certain things like marriage that only a male and a female can do. So,
right.
you know, transgenders and homosexuals aren't really legally and lawfully able to get married to somebody of the, you know, opposite sex.
I
Sorry, of
guess
the same sex.
no, I got you. It's definitely eye-opening, and here again, this is one of the reasons why I did want to invite you, you know, onto the podcast. Here again, hey, we may all have our own personal opinions. There's always the, I guess, the issue or of inclusion and also discrimination, which here again we have actually heard from coaches in our previous segment. You know that, hey, they kind of deal with it all the time. You know what I mean? They're not going to, if you're somebody who's into sports, you're not going to stop somebody from partaking in a sport. Again, of course, there were character issues that may have come up because, again, just in the previous example with Cece, you know, one of the coaches mentioned that, you know, he would question that person's character. But again, when it comes to the law, you know, character does not make the decision. If I'm saying it correctly, if you
Yeah,
follow
I
it,
think that's correct. Yeah, I agree with
yeah.
that.
So oddly, just like I said, just your open opinion about that executive order. How does it affect sports? How does it affect people in general? Again, when it refers to, I guess, inclusion and also just and discrimination.
Well, it's a bit new, and so I think I would have to side on caution and say that I'd like to see how it pans out. But female athletes in particular have faced such difficulties and struggles over history, I suppose.
Yes.
In the United States, they have something called Title IX. I'm not sure if
Yep.
you ever heard of that.
Yep.
So which provides that female athletes are to have equal funding for,
Yep.
well, as close to equal funding as possible for
Mhm.
sports activities within colleges and universities in the United States.
Yep.
And so they fought so long as female athletes to be put on an equal footing as male athletes to
Yep.
try to advance female sports in the United States. And for a person born as a male to get the benefit of that, instinctively feels, well, it's concerning to me,
Right.
instinctively. So in that way, I would be cautious to fully embrace it at this time. I'll say that.
You know what? Again, like I said, just from the other segments, I think that is the general consensus. Whether you're for it or against it, again, it's something that we have to deal with. But like I said, I think the general consensus is, yeah, we must be cautious and not be, I guess, rush into making a decision whether, like I said, whether it's for or against. Again, there are
Yeah.
some issues that we're going to have to deal with, and yeah, the almost is. I don't want to say we have to continue what we've been doing, but again, we have to be able to open up. I guess be attentive, yeah, and just I guess understand the sides and hopefully come up with the best decision for the
Yeah.
name of the sport.
I think that's right. But I think if we look at it from the opposite direction, though, Jerome, I have less of a concern
Mhm.
for a person who was born a female, who becomes a male competing in, like the NBA, for instance. So you have someone who's
Right.
born a female, they become a male, and they compete in like
Mhm.
the NBA or some male-dominated sport. I think I'll
Right.
be fine with that.
Yeah.
I think I'm more concerned with it working the other way around.
And you know what? Again, like I said, the more I have this conversation, I think that is the it becomes it's not to me it's not whether, or I should say, the aspect of, again, inclusion or discrimination is, I guess, diminishing, but it's definitely becoming more of a question of fair play, because
Yeah.
just like you said, hey, there's definitely an acceptance of hey, of a female going into a male dominated sport, or a male sport. To me, I think that shows remarkable strength and brawn and grit. Now, just like you said, going the opposite way, yeah, I think even the science, and that's actually probably going to be another segment that we're going to add on to this. We're actually going to talk to a medical doctor, and
Oh, no.
like you said, address it from the medical standpoint. But physiologically, biologically, I think we're all in agreement that, yeah, there is definitely an unfair advantage for a born male going into a female sport. Well, hey, Audley, you know what? I appreciate your input, your professional advice. This is going to be the first of many. Like I said, this is just season one, episode one. But like I said, there'll definitely be more, and looking forward to having you be a regular panelist on our show here on the podcast on the All Cedar. So, Audley, again, thank you. It is my honor to have you here, sir. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Jerome, it was a pleasure being here, and I look forward to coming back again and talking about some other sports. Hopefully, maybe next time something not as serious as this one was,
Yeah.
but anytime, I'm always available.
All right. Thank you, man. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining us here on the All Cedar podcast, brought to you by Sideline Entertainment Bahamas. And yes, folks, tonight we do have a very interesting topic, and something that here in the Bahamas that we may not have had to deal with as yet, but on international level, I'm sure our student athletes going off abroad, I'm sure they will have. This is something that they will have to deal with, and who knows, maybe eventually in the Bahamas. But I do want to introduce our guest. She is a medical professional, Dr. Sheena Wallace. Tell you what, I think you can do your introduction a little bit better than me, Dr. Wallace. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Okay, I'm Dr. Sheena Smith Wallace. I'm an internal medicine specialist at Princess Margaret Hospital and Doctors Hospital. I also practice in private practice. So I'm at Oak Tree Medical Center and I practice endocrinology there as well. And that's basically it.
Okay, awesome. All right, so Dr. Wallace, again, you're a medical professional, and first of all, I guess the first question for you would be, what is the definition of transgender? I know here in the Bahamas, but again, just for clarification going forward, what is the definition of transgender as far as a medical professional is concerned?
Okay, so medically, transgender is an umbrella term, and it basically describes people whose gender identity or their expression does not match the sex they were assigned at birth, or basically what sex they were born with. So, for example, a person's internal sense of being a male or female or something else is their gender identity. So, for a cisgender or transgender person, their gender identity actually matches the sex that they were born with.
Question for you, and again, it's just to grab some clarification. You've just given us the definition of transgender. Now, I know for even me or people, I guess, in my age bracket, still, I guess, coming to grips with the term, is that would a hermaphrodite be considered a transgender, or I guess, what category does that fall under?
So no, that would fall into a different category. So a transgender person, like I said, it's an umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily need to be a female or a male. Sometimes a person's gender identity doesn't fit into two choices. A person can see themselves as being both male and female, being neither male nor female, or falling in something completely outside. And they can be identified as called genderqueer.
Okay, all right. Okay, that is enlightening. And again, all of this is just to, I guess, help us clarify some of these terms, so when we do hear them, run across them, we know exactly what's being said. And my reason for that, and as we continue on with the conversation, you'll see that again, as far as when it comes to athletics, I guess now there is actually both. We do have or there's always been a question as for one lady in particular who runs for South Africa. She is, I guess, labeled, and I'm not sure if I'm using the politically correct terms, but she is an hermaphrodite, and she has gotten a lot of flack for the amount of hormones in her body compared to other females. But again, just according from the conversation of what you're saying, she would not really be again, transgender, like you said, umbrella term, but she does not fit the category of transgender per se. Now, on the flip side, we do have other athletes who are actually born males, and they do, I guess, fall under the umbrella of transgender, and are now playing female sports. I brought that up specifically for that clarification. But before we get into that, from a medical standpoint, what are some of the differences? I guess physiological, biologically. I mean, I'm sure they're quite clear, but again, for clarification for anybody listening who might have some confusion or be confused, what are some of the differences between, I guess, males, transgenders, and females?
Okay, so biological men and biological women are different.
Mhm.
Biological men tend to have, undeniable physical advantages over the cisgendered females. The majority of scientists believe that testosterone is basically responsible for this, advantage. And men tend to develop stronger muscle size as well as muscle strength due to testosterone. So during puberty, we tend to see men developing stronger joints. Their agility is better. They're much faster than females. And studies have shown that transgender women who have had their testosterone levels suppressed from the normal male testosterone levels to the normal female levels, they tend to have levels actually below their normal female cisgendered counterparts. So they actually lose some of their strength, they lose some of their agility, and they lose some of their speed.
So again, just to make sure that I'm hearing you right and that I'm clear, if you have a born male that decides to I guess become a female, like you said, due to the medications, hormone suppressants, that they actually have lower levels or female levels or lower levels of
Right.
hormones than
So they
their.
actually have, exactly.
Wow.
So they actually have the same type of hormonal level as their female counterparts, so they can actually have a fair competition, actually. And they actually tend not to be better athletes than the female counterparts.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. And again, I guess as we go on into the conversation, you'll see why I'm kind of surprised at that. And then the last question that I have for you, just off a list of questions before I go into two topics, I guess kind of side or having to do with this. Do transgenders and I guess we kind of touched on this. Do they actually possess any advantage, or do they become disadvantaged due to, I guess, medications or suppressants that they may be taking to, I guess, fit any one in particular gender?
Right. So in fact, the transgender females, they lose their speed, their strength, and their agility. In fact, trans women will often retain some of their physiological advantage, for example, the larger frame and muscle mass that they get during puberty. However, once they've been on hormonal replacement therapy after about a year, these trans women will experience, like I said before, the decreased speed, the decreased strength, and the decreased agility. So they will actually be good competitors for female counterparts.
Oh wow. Okay, all right. So, like I said, and the reason for my shock, or I should say my surprise, is I just wanted to give a couple of examples. I know we were even talking, before we came on the air, but one of the most popular examples, this is surfaced on Facebook. I've also used it on my sports page. Is we have the example of Craig Tefler, and this actually dates back to like 2016 or 2017. So I always remind folks like, hey, this issue has been around for some time. I guess just because of President Biden's executive order, it's kind of resurfaced. But this article, again, like I said, back in 2016, Craig Tefler was ranked 200th in the men's hurdles in 2016 and ranked nationally 390th in 2017. So Craig changed his name to Cece in 2018 and said that he is a woman now and won the championships, finishing first in the women's hurdles in 2019. And the other example that I wanted to give, I actually saw this come across my timeline in a group not too long ago, and there was a female or a born male basketball player decided to become a female and played on a women's basketball team. So I just wanted to, just get your input on
Yeah,
that.
we have to also remember that genetics plays a role in that as well. So how your body is built, there are other factors that have to be considered. So, for example, you can have large females playing basketball with smaller females. So that's kind of a similar kind of thing. So you have to kind of compare everything, can't compare apples to apples, basically.
Well, Dr. Wallace, I would love to thank you for all of your insight. You've definitely opened up my eyes. I'm sure a lot of the folks listening have gotten some good information, definitely a little bit more understanding as well. And I'm sure this will not be the last time that we have you on our show. Again, I'd just like to thank you for your contribution. We'll be looking forward to having you on our show on the All Cedar more times.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to everybody who has listened. We invite you to stay tuned. This will be something that we'll be doing on a weekly basis. So again, you can follow Sideline Sports Bahamas on Facebook. That's actually Sideline Sports and Entertainment Bahamas. We're also on Instagram as well, Sideline Sports Bahamas. And you can also follow us on YouTube as well. And again, if you have any questions, any topics that you would like for us to discuss during the All Cedar, hey, go ahead, send us a note, follow us, and we'll be sure to get it on. But again, thank you to all of the panel and everybody listening. Again, everybody enjoy.